Open source intelligence is a growing field. It's pretty important for a lot of different reasons. You know, in Bosnia, there's a lot of media manipulation and disinformation campaigns and misinformation and political manipulation and all of those sorts of topics. So, of course, this is very important for journalists who are trying to verify pieces of information and figure out, where different sources of information is coming from. But it's not only important for journalists, it's also important for cybersecurity professionals, people who work in marketing and business, people trying to research who might be consumers of their product, advertisers, detectives and law enforcement use open source intelligence techniques to find suspects or people wanted for various crimes. So it's important for a lot of different reasons. I'll talk a little bit about how I got into this work, and then I'll show you some tools, and then I'll kind of do a more interactive game where we'll work on some of these skills that I talk about. So for me, I work at an organization called MuckRock. It is a journalism organization in the United States. We work with partners kind of all over the world: South America, Africa, Eastern Europe, kind of all over the place. And we work on international investigations. We've worked on really important stuff like Panama Papers, things like that. And open source intelligence is a really important tool in our tool belt for journalistic work all over. Now, I'm not a journalist, but I have a lot of these skill sets. I worked as a cybersecurity professional for a long time. Now I work more as just a programmer. But in my background, I used open source intelligence techniques to research far-right parties and members of far-right movements kind of all over the world. These are parties that are interested in instigating nationalistic fervor and things like that, of those nature. So a little use case that I can go through first is this guy. He's on Twitter. He leads a movement called Generation Identity, or Generation Identity, and specifically in Russia. And he's connected to some of the international far-right figures in that world. And I didn't know what his real name is. All I knew is that he is on Twitter and that he has this Twitter handle, Ross Marson. And I figured that that's probably not his real name. It doesn't sound very Russian as a name. But I started to look through his profile a little bit. And, I see some images of him here. He lists his location in Armenia. Of course, he could fake that very easily. But he posts some other images on Twitter here, on social media. And, he posts his face, right? So from his face, there's a couple different tools that I can use that are publicly available. Anybody can use them. Some of them are free, some of them are paid. I link to them under images in RiseUp. So if I go to PimEyes, this is a public, but anybody can search. But if you want to look at what website an image is on, you have to pay. So, for example, I can upload an image for free and see. It's kind of like Google Images, but better. What it allows you to do is use facial recognition to find other images of this guy on the internet somewhere. So I can hit search. And I encourage you to play around with these tools too. And see what you find. Search yourself or search somebody else that you're interested in investigating or something like that. And as you can see, I can see multiple images of him across time, on the internet in different locations, right? From there, I find, a professional photo of him maybe. So all of this, the searching is free. If you want to click on open image, that's the part where it's paid. And especially if you want to hit open website, that'll tell you what website this was actually posted on at some point. So from this tool, I was able to find a couple different images of him. One in professional settings that he used for his job, and another one where he used a different pseudonym for his name, Ross Marsov, which is also a fake name, but he was writing as a under a pseudonym on certain websites. More interestingly, though, I find images of him in the kind of military gear in Russia, and clearly this is probably in Ukraine around this time in the war. And I see destroyed building in the background, and I find more details. So OSINT is kind of like using different tools to dig as far as you can and try to find little connections between pieces of data. Let me show you a different image I found of Ross. Maybe it's this one. No, go back. Wrong one again. It's Ross 3. This other image of Ross I found, I find him again in military gear, and then I find him with a background with like smokestacks and buildings that are destroyed. And I want to try to figure out where this photo is taken. So what I do is use another imaging tool called Google Lens or Google Images also. Lens is if you want to search on your phone, you can take a photo. So I go onto Google Images. I run the third image. And I find other photos of him and other articles of him. And from there, I find that this image was taken in, so actually if I can also adjust the image on where it's taken. I can actually find the location in which he was stationed at. And I find out through some articles that this is in Mariupol, which is a sieged city in Ukraine, bordering Russia, that had a manufacturing facilities. So I know he was a part of that siege, and I know he's either in Wagner Group, which is a right-wing group, that paramilitary group, or he's in the military itself. Through some more digging, there's another website for images called Search for Faces. This one is more about kind of Russian social media sites like VKontakte, VK, and some other like TikTok, Clubhouse, some other types of social media. You can search for images on this tool too, and this one's free. There's no paid feature to this site. And I searched and I was able to find his real name eventually. And that led to some reporting because he was a part of separatist movements in Armenia at this time that was trying to basically kick NATO out of that region. So yeah, that's one investigation and some tools that I used to try to figure out who is this Ross Marson guy, who's the president of this organization that I'm interested in. That's just images, okay? There are a lot of different pieces of information that you can get that might lead you to a different different pipeline or a different, how do I explain it? Like a different route to finding information. I linked to a presentation that I gave in Georgia, Georgia, here at the bottom, that goes over some other tools that I've gone through as well. One that I like to use is to try to figure out where images are taken from. If you take a photo on a digital camera or on a smartphone and you have location services enabled on your camera app, it will tag a GPS coordinates on an image. And so this image, for example, I can get the link to it. I'm going to download it. And then there's a couple different tools. This one I really like because it's on the web and I don't have to download any software or anything. Actually, let me use Pick2Map. There's metadata to go and then Pick2Map as well. Pick2Map is a little easier because if you're just interested in the location, it will actually plot it on a map for you. And this one tells me in the metadata, basically in the underlying tag of this image, there was GPS coordinates. And it tells me that it was taken in this address in Italy on this date and taken on this type of camera. This is one open source intelligence technique that I use all the time. There's also software that does this. That's not just a website. A very popular one is EXIF tool. It's available on Windows, Mac, Linux, all the operating systems. I use it all the time. It has a graphical user interface you can install too. So I can do the same thing. I can open up the image in EXIF tool, and I can see that it was taken on a Coolpix, Nikon Coolpix P6000. And I can see maybe EXIF, yeah. If I scroll down, it will tell me the GPS coordinates that are stored in the image file. So that's just images. Of course, there's a lot of other data points that you can hop from one piece of information to the other. There's, of course, social media. I mentioned Twitter here, but there's there's Facebook, there's TikTok, there's Telegram. There's all sorts of social media platforms out there, and what you can do is to try to find if someone reuses a username or something like that. You might be able to find them on a different social media platform. Or if they, of course, have an image of them that they post, you might be able to find what their name is and then find a different social media platform for them that way. I link to some big resources in that pad that I dropped in the chat, including some like OSINT framework, which allows you to dig in. Like, let's say I have a different piece of information. Let's say I just have a username and I want to find other websites that he might be on. I can use something like NameCheck or check usernames or some of these other websites to find what other websites he might be posting information on. Again, also, if I have an email address or something like that, I may be able to find him in an email search somewhere and see if that information is public. A really popular one I like to use all the time is this website called Have I Been Pwned? What this allows you to do is search either an email or a phone number, and it will tell you if that email or phone number has appeared in a data breach somewhere on the internet. Just for example, I'm going to use my own old email. I don't use this email anymore, but I know that it appears in some data breaches. And if I scroll down, it says, oh no, you were found in 3 data breaches. And I know that my information was compromised on some of these websites. And it tells me what types of information: email address, names, passwords, usernames, and stuff like that. I encourage you to type in your own email address into this website. This website was created for people to know that their information was breached somewhere on the internet, and to change their passwords if it says that they appear in a data breach. But it is also an important investigation tool, because although this website doesn't tell me, the name or the password, or sometimes there's an address associated with it or something like that, it doesn't tell me that piece of information. It will at least tell me if there is information out there that exists. Another website called dehashed.com allows me, with a paid account, I can actually look at email addresses or phone numbers, and it will allow me to search. See, it's prompting me to pay and log in, but it allows me to actually search for that information, and it will show me the password that was used, or the email address and name that was tied to the account, and so on and so forth. I use this one if someone sends in, let's say, a threatening email, or is sending me spam or something like that. I want to try to figure out who is sending me this information, because of course anybody can create an email address. But if it appears in a data breach somewhere, it might tell me the name that is tied to that email account, or some other piece of information that I can use to try to figure out who this person is. There's of course other types of information that you might be able to get. I mentioned metadata earlier. Metadata is kind of a term that means information about other information. So I talked about the image, right? This image. Underlying this image, encoded in here, is that GPS coordinates. That is a piece of metadata. There's other types of metadata out there. That's not nearly the only one. Videos, of course, also have metadata. Even PDFs have metadata. So like when you type a document on your computer and you use something like Microsoft Word, or Microsoft Excel, or even Google Docs or something like that, it will tell you the owner or the creator of the document. And it will say this was created by this person's name. And if it's attached to an organization, it might tell you the name of the organization that created the file as well. And you can use the same tool that I mentioned earlier. You can use either metadata to go, or you can use something like EXIF tool. And then when you open the PDF in there, it will show you. I'm going to do a live one. I'll just find one very quickly. This is actually the site I work on all the time. Let's see. Let's find a public document that I've uploaded somewhere, or just a different document. Let me download this. Okay, yeah, so it tells me it was built on Adobe. Oh, opened it instead. If I scroll down. Okay, so this document doesn't tell me any authorship information, because it was just one that I found on the internet. But it does tell me the last time it was modified, which is February 23rd, 2023. It tells me what software was used to create the PDF. It was Acrobat PDF Maker 22. And it might tell me, oh, it actually does tell me the creator, Jay Eater, whoever that is. I suppose that this is Department of Health and Human Services. in the United States. So I imagine that that's probably an employee of that department. And I can view that on EXIF tool. That's a piece of metadata, and it tells me who is potentially the author of the document that I'm looking at. There's, of course, other different types. If I have a telephone number, for example, there's different resources that allow me to try to figure out who owns that phone number. A lot of them, unfortunately, are geared toward the United States. There are some international ones on here. I really like the Twilio lookup tool because it includes international phone numbers. Another tip that I like to do is just I like to add that phone number to my contacts, and then I will upload my contacts to, like, let's say Facebook or Instagram or Viber or WhatsApp, and see if they have a profile on there that becomes visible once I import them as a contact. Then I might gain some information, especially like a Facebook profile tied to a phone number. They are most likely to use their real name, and that way it tells me who that person is from their phone number. There's, of course, other tools. Let's say I don't have any metadata, and I tried using something like Yandex image search, which is like a Russian image search tool, or I use Google Images, and I'm not able to find anything. Let's say I go back. Let's say I go back here and I don't have any details about where this image was taken, for example, but I know there's a statue present here. There's some strategies that I can use to try to figure out where this image might be taken. I know this clearly looks like it's you know, somewhere with a conflict happening. I look at his clothing and I see a link to a website here that sells like military-like equipment in Russia. So I presume it's somewhere in that proximity. I know it's somewhere with a war currently happening, so I can deduce that this is probably happening in Ukraine. I'm not certain, of course, but I look in the background and I also see that there is water with a stream, and that there's an industrial area. If I learn a little bit more about the geography of Ukraine, I can also deduct that this is likely Mariupol because they have access to a large body of water there, and there are smokestacks. So those are other techniques that I can use. Try to look into the background, try to snoop and see what kind of small details I can find in an image. And from there, you know, I could use something like Google Maps, Street View, or I can use Google Earth to try to find, try to look through there and see, hey, where is this image probably taken? That's a technique like I use all the time. In the presentation that I linked to in the pad that I dropped in the chat, at the last page, there are some games, including one called the GeoGuessr. If you open that, the entire point of this is a game where you build up those skills of trying to, let me actually sign up for an account with my email. Go to login. I don't remember my login. Anyways, this website builds your skills to try to identify where a image is taken, or try to hunt and find where in the world you are. And it gives you very few clues, but it tells you if you are correct or not. So those are some, but not all, open source intelligence tools that I use kind of all the time. Some are facial recognition tools, some are email-based tools or phone numbers. I linked to a couple other frameworks that have even more resources. Another website I like to use very often is Intel Techniques. If I go under the Tools tab, it tells me a subset, like let's say I have an IP address, or I have someone that I know is trying to use Bitcoin or a virtual currency. There are different tools that allow me to try to find who is attached to, a Bitcoin address, or who is attached to a particular website. There are like, let's say I have a website out there and someone is anonymously posting and I don't know who owns the website. I might be able to run a whois. Whois is a really easy resource that allows you to go ahead and find who might own a website. I'll show you what I mean by that. I'll type in my own organization's website. And if I scroll down, it will tell me when it was registered on, who the register is for the website. This is something that you might run into if you investigate websites. Sometimes there are privacy protections for things like whois, but there are other ways to try to figure out who might own this website. Another resource is I go under the DNS records and I scroll down, and it might tell me more information like DNS at DNS Made Easy. This is probably a resource that this website uses. And then it tells me Heroku, which is what my organization uses to run our website. So that's another piece of information that I can use. It also tells me a bunch of IP addresses, which I, of course, can go back to one of these OSINT tools to try to figure out, who runs those IP addresses, who might be the hosting provider, things like that. I see something in the chat. Let me check. Thank you for reposting the link. There is, of course, vehicles are something that comes up pretty frequently in my research. Let's say I have a license plate or I have a VIN number and I want to try to figure out what type of vehicle is being driven. I can use some of these resources. There is also a tool, let me find it, to find car make and model. There's carnet.ai, which if you have an image of a car, you can upload it and it will be able to tell you what vehicle it thinks that car is, basically, which tells you, okay, great, I know who the make and manufacturer of the car is. Maybe I can find more images of that car on the internet. Maybe I have a license plate and I can find more information using some of these websites. Or maybe I'm very lucky and I have a VIN number, which will tell me more information. There's also websites that allow you to try to compare license plates. Every country kind of has different license plates and they all look a little bit differently. There are websites out there that allow you to see which license plate that particular vehicle might be driving if you can't see it very clearly. I mentioned breaches and leaks earlier. There, of course, is Have I Been Pwned, which I already showed you, dehashed, but there's also some other websites that they link to here. Yeah, so, there's a lot of different pieces of information that you can gain, and there are a lot of different resources that you can use to try to find other pieces of information to link and create kind of a map about someone or something or an organization that you might be investigating. And these are all techniques that I use all the time. In the presentation, I linked to 2 games at the bottom. This other game, I mentioned GeoGuessr, which allows you to kind of try to find where in the world you might be located just by looking around you and trying to pick out clues. This game uses some of the other skill sets, actually using your digging tools and some of your other strategies to try to figure out more information. This presentation also includes some other things that may or may not be relevant to your interests, including things like preserving data and deepfakes, which for people who are not aware, deepfakes are when a form of artificial intelligence or software creates fake images of people or uses real images of people to create a video that shows them speaking and saying something that they're not actually saying, things like that. There's also some resources that I linked to on being able to detect, for example, if an image is photoshopped. I think it's in this presentation, but I also linked to it here. Photoforensics.com is a really good website for that. So if you have an image, you can upload it. And I dropped an article on some folks that actually use this tool to detect if somebody is photoshopping. And the idea is if you drop an image and you run it through photo forensics, this image is real. So this rubber duck was on this car, and then it was in the hot sun and it melted. And this image is very unlikely to be manipulated or photoshopped because the tool, the idea is if it's photoshopped, they have layers and there's a lot of contrast between different portions of the image. And this one seems quite normal. Whereas if I scroll down, there's an image of a manipulated image. There is Kim Jong-un with a floppy disk here. And if I scroll down, the floppy disk is in very high contrast compared to the rest of the image here. And that's a key indicator that this is a manipulated image, basically. And that allows us basically to say, yeah, this image is faked. And later on, people found the actual image of Kim Jong-un, and he was actually holding something. I think it was like a passport or something like that. But yeah, this article kind of goes through that tool. But that is a tool that you can use to try to see if an image is Photoshop. I linked to some other resources in here that allow you to detect if an image is a deepfake. There's also some resources if you have a video and you're not sure if it's real or not. There are some free resources out there that allows you to upload a video and it tells you if it likely thinks an image is a deep fake or not. Yeah, so that's kind of a very brief overview. This is a very huge field, right? There's a lot of things that you can get into. Let me show you one article of a guy I actually was investigating. This guy was interesting to me because he was trying to sell weapons in Bosnia, in Banja Luka. And he was selling these weapons to far-right groups across Europe, right? And so I investigated this guy, and my friend wrote this article here. And it shows you I used some techniques, some of these techniques. I knew his username, for example, and from his username, I was able to get an email address. And from there, you know, I found other pieces of information about him. And I basically was able to figure out, hey, this guy, he's trying to sell, you know, he's trying to smuggle arms in Bosnia and sell it to other people illegally. And I reported him. He's part of the Canadian Navy. And they removed him from the Canadian Navy. I'll drop a link to that article here. But all of these tools, they have real world impact, and you can use these tools for a lot of different techniques. You know, I use it to research people on the far right, but there's people that use it to find businesses or owners of businesses, or find customers that might be interested in their product to advertise to. There's journalists, of course, that use it to verify source information. There's a lot of different use cases for this kind of these kind of tools and this kind of toolkit. It's also a good toolkit for anybody trying to get into cybersecurity, because of course there's people, hackers and stuff like that. All of these things kind of intersect with that. I see a question in the Q&A.
We will talk about later.
So the question is there a possibility in the near future to not know the difference between deepfake videos and or Photoshop videos with real ones? Photoshop, I think, is much easier to detect. Deepfaked videos are becoming more and more difficult. So there's kind of a race, right, between people who are making deepfakes and people who are trying to detect deepfakes. And it's kind of, I call it an arms race. There's people who are trying to detect deepfakes, and if they release their models and they release the way that they investigate, sometimes the people who are making deepfakes look at that research and create better deepfakes so that they circumvent detection. There are other companies that are closing their code because they don't want people to figure out how to bypass or circumvent deepfake detection. I think it's certainly a possibility that in the future, in the very near future, we might have deepfakes that are not being able to be detected. In my presentation on deepfake detection, I go over something called verifiable data, which I think is the future of media. We will no longer be able to trust. A lot of us are already very skeptical of media, of course, especially people from our own country. We're very skeptical of what we see on TV and social media and so forth, but we're increasingly going to be susceptible to things like deepfakes. And in the case that there is that future where we're not able to detect deepfakes anymore, the only way that we can prove that something is not a deepfake is through something called verifiable data collection. And I go over that in this presentation. It basically uses some computing techniques, including hashing, to ensure that data was created at a certain time and location, and by a certain, for example, it shows you metadata like it was shot on an Apple iPhone at this time and date in Georgia Standard Time, so on and so forth. That's the only way that we're going to come to actually solving the problem of deepfakes long term, because there's always going to be that arms race. Does that answer that question, Ahmed? I just wanted to make sure that we answered it. Awesome. I encourage you guys, feel free to ask me any questions in Bosnian or in English. I just present a little easier in English, so that's why I chose to present in English, but I do speak Bosnian. I can understand questions in Bosnian. I might answer in English if it's something technical, but feel free to pop any questions you might have in the Q&A. I will also drop my email address in here. If you have any questions about open source intelligence or using any of these tools, or you have a tool that is paid and it's expensive, I probably have a subscription and I'll share it with you. But feel free to pop any questions you might have in the Q&A.
Oh, thank you for the useful speech. And now, dear audience, as Sanjin said, it's time for the question and answer part. You can ask questions by writing something in the chat or the question section, and I will read it to the lecturer. If you want, you can raise your hand and I'll grant access to the microphone. I will wait for a few minutes while you type, and in the meantime, I have a question. What are some tips for organizing and managing the vast amounts of data updated through OSINT research?
Yeah, there's a couple different ones. For people, for low-tech solutions, there's of course Google Sheets. I use like Excel all the time. It's a way that I keep organized. I have like, let's say, a target name, and then I have another piece of information linked to them. I'll have it in like a big Google Sheet or something like that. There are things like very easy to use database tools, things like base row. I linked to it in the chat. It's free to use. It's more powerful than Google Sheets because it actually allows you to use powerful database features. There's of course expensive, but also people like to use it. Of course, Airtable. It allows you to create, Google has like Google Forms, of course, that link to a Google Sheet. Airtable has Airtable forms. The thing about Airtable is you can do more computational stuff if you have very large amounts of data. It makes it a little bit easier to manage. But those are kind of the three tools that I see day to day that a lot of OSINT researchers use to manage large data sets. There are other open source platforms that people use, things like Maltego, type the name in the chat, that allow you to do like larger scale investigations and keep track of that. Another very useful tool that I use all the time that I didn't mention is archive.org. If I run a piece of information and I think that it's very likely that it's going to change in the future, I want to capture it as it is right now, and have a permanent snapshot of it. I use archive.org all the time. There's also archive.is. Some websites don't work very well with archive.org, and sometimes I'll just run it through archive.is, and I have better luck with it. And then I keep those archive links somewhere that I know, and I label them like this is this piece of information that I archived at this date and time. I know there are some like browser extensions for Firefox, I think, and Chrome. I don't remember the name of them, but people use them to automatically archive any information they come across. I know archive.org has one, but there's also ones that will like automatically screenshot different pieces of information. I don't remember what they're called, but I know that people use them to manage data.
Thank you. We have another question from audience. They say, can you share with us some ways to protect our data? And at this time, is it even possible?
Yeah, it totally is possible. Let me share another presentation that I have. 1 second. Let me find it. I have a presentation kind of about the reverse of OSINT, is like getting rid of as much information online as possible. It's specifically about something called data brokers, which for people who are not aware, data brokers are they are entities that collect mass amounts of information for marketing, but also for social media purposes, so on and so forth. I have a presentation particularly about this topic. Let me find it. I didn't have it on hand. Data broker breakdown. Copy link. Let me make a small URL for this because I'm on my phone here. Some really useful tips is just practicing something I call digital hygiene. Googling yourself, finding out what information you can find about yourself. I mentioned, for example, PimEyes. You can, of course, find people on PimEyes, but you can also opt out. And most of these resources that I link to on OSINT, there are ways to get rid of that information, luckily. Of course, if someone has already archived that information, somewhere, there are some resources where you can get information pulled from archive.org, but it's one, unlikely that someone is that interested in you right now that the information is already archived. But two, you can remove information that's currently on the web, including from PIMIs. Search for phrases is not opt-outable. So if you have ever had a vContacte or something like that, it's very likely that that information is just out there. I mentioned have I been pwned? Searching your email on there and seeing what websites have been in a data breach in the past is very good advice, because if you use that password somewhere and you used it somewhere else, you need to change that password, right? And of course, practicing good digital security means using something like a password manager. I'll drop a link to a password manager I use called 1Password, or using things like two-factor authentication. There's two-factor authentication that uses a text message, maybe not so good, especially in Bosnia, because the cell networks can be intercepted and stuff like that, or you might have a virus. But there are things like Google Authenticator or Authy, which are free apps that generate the code on your phone. They don't send you a code or anything like that. They just generate the code on their phone, and then you have to type that in after you type in your password. Those are all strategies that we can use to be more secure online and to make sure that our passwords and former data breaches are not out there. Of course, being cognizant, there's no reason to be paranoid per se, but being cognizant and being aware of what information we have online is really important, especially in the year 2023, because of the OSINT tools I mentioned, but also because there's people with bad intentions, people who are trying to scam you out of money or log into your bank account and steal all your money, or harass you online. All of those things are reasons why we should practice good digital hygiene on social media. Be careful about what we post and with who we post to. Make sure that things aren't public necessarily. Make posts private if they have to be. Make our accounts private if they have to be. Those sorts of strategies are all good strategies that we can use to be safer online. And I'm a digital security trainer. Before I ever was a programmer or before I ever was in the journalism world, but I linked to a presentation that kind of breaks down some of the prevention techniques that we can do to be safer online.
Thank you. How can you leverage the power of data visualization tools for hosting?
Yeah, visualization tools. There are a couple that I use. Once you have an Airtable or a base row table, you have access to a database, which makes it a lot easier. You can export that as like a SQL file or something like that, and then you can use Python, pandas or matplotlib to work with that. There are some more streamlined data visualization tools. Something I like to use is called Streamlit. It's kind of like a Python environment online. So you don't have to worry about like setting up a server or having information locally stored or anything like that. And it's a resource I use pretty frequently. Yeah, so Streamlit is a good one. There's also network mapping tools. I mentioned Maltego earlier. That one I like to use to visualize social networks that occur. There are a lot of resources for visualization in the Intel Techniques website as well. Some YouTubers also go over this. There's a lot of YouTube videos about OSINT and visualization. Those are just some of the ones that I use.
The last question is, what are some best practices for verifying the accuracy and reliability of information obtained through OSINT?
Very good question. So I mentioned metadata earlier, right? Where we can see what, like, let's say GPS coordinates or who an author of a PDF is or something like that. But that information, just as easily as it's able to be read, can also be manipulated. So of course, people who are malicious can also create fake profiles linked to an individual. They can manipulate metadata. They can make themselves appear to be someone else when they're really not. All of these things are very, all of these things you have to be very considerate of when you're doing investigations like this, and to not rely on a single data point leading back to an identity, right? So when I mentioned Boris, the Unicorn Riot article we dropped in the chat, it wasn't one piece of information that I was relying on to associate his pseudonym Moonlord to Boris. There was multiple pieces of information that I had to corroborate, right? The more pieces of information that tie back to the original poster, or the original identity, the better. If they post about certain types of information, or like what kind of food they're eating online, or I didn't go over the game, but there's in the cyber detective game, I'll drop a link to it in the chat. You use multiple different pieces of information to validate that chain of events and that chain of information. My best advice is to never rely on one piece of information because it's likely to be weak. Two, if it's image based, always do your due cognizance. Try to reverse image search it, for example, and see if that image pops up somewhere else on the internet. Try to use deepfake detection tools and see, is this even a real person? A lot of times it's like a fake profile, and they use something like a website like thispersondoesnotexist.com to generate a fake photo of someone. Do your due diligence and just assume that the information that you're getting is false, and you have to work to prove that that information is true. So never come into an investigation assuming that the information you're coming across is true. Assume that it's false and work to prove that it is true. Does that make sense?
Yes. And thank you, dear Sanjin, for really grateful speech and useful. I think it's time that we have to finish our meeting.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Thank you for your time and for supporting our work.
Mm-hmm.
Dear audience, you can follow the work of the Bosnia-Herzegovina Futures Foundation on all social networks. Like and comment also. We will hear from you next month with a new topic and new lecture. I wish you a pleasant rest of the evening. Thank you.
Hvala vam puno. Ciao.